My name is Andrea Gonzalez, and I work at Trellis Strategies. Thank you for joining us today. We're excited to partner with C4SW, Coalition for Student Wellbeing, to elevate the discussion of post-secondary student well-being and mental health. During the next hour, we'll discuss key findings from Trellis Strategies' 2024 Student Financial Wellness Survey. Then we'll have a panel discussion highlighting challenges and effective practices from both student and institutional perspectives. We have such a great panel with 2 students and an administrator. It's going to be wonderful. Our discussion will be led by our research manager, Carla Fletcher. And it does seem like there's been a leveling off of filing in. So Carla, I will go ahead and hand it over to you to get us started.
Great. Thank you so much, Andrea. And thank you everyone for joining us today to explore a very important component of student wellness, and that is mental health. This is essential for overall well-being and personal growth for students, and of course it can impact their academic performance. Creating support systems on campus, things like counseling services, peer networks, stigma-free conversations, these kinds of things can help students feel safe seeking help. And addressing student mental health isn't just about preventing crisis. It's about building the conditions where students can thrive academically, socially, and personally. So I'm going to start the webinar off by sort of setting the table with some findings from our fall 2024 Student Financial Wellness Survey around mental health and how that connects with financial wellness and impacting academic success. And then let me go ahead and share my screen here. We have a fantastic panel today who can speak to both the student and institutional perspectives regarding student mental health and support systems on campuses. So I'm going to go ahead and let each panelist introduce themselves and their role. And just to make it easier, we're going to go in the order on the slides. So Carson will go first, and then Edgar, and then Dr. Willis. So go ahead, Carson.
Thank you so much, Carla, and it's great to be here with all of you. My name is Carson Domey, and I serve as the Executive Director of the Coalition for Student Wellbeing. Also heading back down to Austin in just a few days here to start my senior year at the University of Texas at Austin. So excited to be here with you all, and we're glad that the Coalition is able to collaborate with Trellis to pull together today's conversation. The mission of the Coalition for Student Wellbeing is to bridge the gap between students and decision makers through advocacy, collaboration, and education, in hopes of promoting health and wellness on college campuses. So, we're so glad to be a part of this conversation and hope to have the chance to connect with y'all in the future.
Hello, everyone. I'm Edgar Loya, longtime friend of Carson Domey. I go to the University of Texas as well, except a different one, the University of Texas at El Paso. I served as last year's student body president, where I helped lead initiatives to help go ahead and fight food insecurity and student well-being. So I'm very excited to be here with you all and share a little bit of insight.
That's awesome. Thank you, Carla. I'm Kent Willis, and I serve as the Senior Vice President for Enrollment and Student Engagement at Stephen F. Austin State University. And I'm just grateful for Trellis and the Coalition for Student Wellbeing for this opportunity to engage in this important conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Looking forward to that conversation we'll have in just a bit. So I want to start my section of this by just sort of introducing Trellis Strategies to those who don't know us. We are a nonprofit research and consulting organization, and we've been in the higher ed research space for about 40 years now. But over the past decade, we've been focusing more strongly on student wellness, and we do that in large part through our annual Student Financial Wellness Survey. This survey is implemented every fall. It's completely free to participate for institutions, so if there are any schools out there who are interested in joining this fall, there is still time. On this slide, we have the report and infographic from our 2024 implementation, and you can get to that through the QR codes or by going to the Research Hub on the Trellis Strategies website. And we will be using 2024 data today for the presentation. We had over 53,000 responses from students from 104 institutions across 27 states in the fall of 2024. So let's go ahead and dive into the data on overall mental health for respondents. We know that positive mental health is fundamental to the wellness, academic success, and overall satisfaction of college students. And despite its critical role in persistence and attainment of credentials of value, college students report poor mental health at high rates. So to better understand the mental health landscape among college students, our survey includes 2 validated scales to assess the prevalence of major depressive disorder and generalized anxiety disorder, in addition to questions about loneliness and awareness of available mental health counseling services on campus. So this analysis reveals that in our survey that 33% of 2024 respondents experienced symptoms of major depressive disorder, and 44% exhibited signs of generalized anxiety disorder. And as I mentioned, we also ask about loneliness. A critical component of mental wellness is feeling that community and connection with others. But unfortunately, loneliness among American adults has increased since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. National data show that approximately 36% of all Americans, including 61% of young adults, report feeling lonely frequently or almost all the time or all the time. And you can see that that number is pretty closely aligned with what we see in our survey, demonstrating that that loneliness epidemic extends to college students as well. Over half of our respondents indicated feeling lonely sometimes or always, and in fact, only 15% reported that they never feel lonely. Research suggests that elevated levels of loneliness are strongly associated with heightened psychological distress. Almost all of our participating institutions had some sort of mental health or counseling services available for their students, 96% of the 104 participating institutions. So the chart that you can see on the slide is looking at students who responded from those institutions that had services. And you can see that 27% of them were unaware of the resources. So this just highlights an opportunity for improved communication and outreach efforts to ensure that all students know about these available resources in case they do need them. And when we look at overall mental health challenges, we found that half of our respondents were experiencing some degree of symptoms of either anxiety or depression, and 27% of respondents were experiencing both anxiety and depression when they were responding to the survey, or in the 2 weeks prior. And we'll get to some of those, the exact questions in the scales in just a bit. We also looked at some student populations that were more or less likely to report mental health concerns compared to their peers. So on the left, you'll see that first-generation students, female students, former foster youth, and LGBTQIA+ students were significantly more likely to report experiencing poor mental health. Now, interestingly, parenting students were less likely to report mental health concerns compared to their non-parenting peers. And this finding aligns with previous research from many other groups, such as the Hope Center, New America Child Trends. All these groups have also observed lower rates of self-reported anxiety and depression among student parents. All right, so now we're going to shift into some of our findings on financial security for students with any mental health concern, those reporting either indicators of generalized anxiety disorder or major depressive disorder or both. And so you'll see in the charts, our respondents with any self-reported indicators of mental health challenges, the depressive disorder or the generalized anxiety disorder, they are noted in dark blue, and we're calling them any likely, as in likely to be experiencing depression or anxiety or both. And then those in orange we're calling neither likely, and these are respondents who did not indicate experiencing either depression or anxiety through the scales in the survey. So we can see that 81% of students with symptoms of anxiety or depression revealed that they had faced financial challenges in college, and that compares to 63% of their peers who did not have these symptoms. We then ask a follow-up question for those students who indicated yes on the financial difficulties question. And that's asking them if they had difficulty concentrating on their schoolwork because of their financial situation. And we can see that these financial issues seem to lead to anxiety, with 59% of our any likely students with financial challenges reporting that they did have difficulty concentrating due to their financial situation. And that compares to 20% among respondents who did not report experiencing mental health concerns through the scales in the survey. We also ask about students' access to emergency resources. So overall, among all of our undergraduate respondents in the survey, 56% said that they would struggle to get $500 in cash or credit to meet an unexpected need in the next month. Now, this rate was somewhat higher among our undergraduate students who had mental health challenges at 66%, and that's compared to their neither likely peers at 46%. And then here we're looking at students reporting that they were running out of money between the beginning of 2024 and the time that they took the survey in October or November of the same year. And the disparity here is pretty stark. 77% of our any likely students had run out of money at least once, compared to 60% of their neither likely peers. And then when you look at those who ran out of money 8 or more times, you can see a very big difference between the two groups there. All right, so now we're going to kind of put that together. We're going to look at how mental health and financial insecurity intersect and take a look at basic needs. Many students report basic needs insecurity, which is characterized as a persistent lack of access to resources necessary for maintaining health and well-being, including things like nutritious food, stable housing, childcare, reliable transportation, access to mental health services. So in the chart on this slide, we're actually looking specifically at 3 things in the basic needs universe. We're looking at food security, housing security, and homelessness. 70% of students who screen positive on either the anxiety or depression scale or both experienced one or more forms of basic needs insecurity. That is the food insecurity, housing insecurity, or homelessness, or more than one of those. Almost 2 in 5 students, 39%, who were experiencing any likely mental health concern, had been both food and housing insecure during the year. And 14% had experienced all 3 forms of these basic needs insecurities during the year. Now, here's the indicators that I was talking about earlier. Food insecurity, this is the limited or uncertain access to nutritious and adequate food. As we know, it's widespread in post-secondary settings, unfortunately. This slide features some indicators of food security for our any likely students, our students who screen positive on the anxiety or depression scales, or both. And it puts it into context for us. 57% who reported any of those mental health symptoms couldn't afford balanced meals. 48% bought food that didn't last and had no money to get more. 44% cut the size of their meals because there wasn't enough money for more. 43% ate less than they felt they should, and most troubling, 37% were hungry but did not eat because there wasn't enough food. And then looking at our mental health indicators, this slide is looking at the indicators of students who reported that they'd have issues getting $500 in cash or credit. So we're kind of flipping this a little bit to look at students who were financially insecure and then looking at the indicators of mental health scales for them. And these numbers represent the frequency of these students indicating a depressed mood or anxiety at least once in the prior 14 days from the time they took the survey. So the student can select that they never felt this over the past 14 days, felt it several days, felt it more than half the days, or felt it nearly every day. And we see that 75% of students who would have issues getting $500 in cash or credit said they had little interest or pleasure in doing things at least several days in the past 14 days. And 71% felt down, depressed, or hopeless at least several days in the last 14 days. Now, reports of anxiety are even more common. And we can see that 79% of these students who would have trouble getting $500 said that they were unable to control their worrying at least several days over the past 2 weeks, and 85% were feeling nervous, anxious, or on edge at least several days over the past 2 weeks. And looking at reports of anxiety specifically, about a quarter of respondents who were financially insecure felt that anxious, could not stop or control worrying, or felt nervous, anxious, or on edge nearly every day on both of those measures. So that's a lot of students who are financially insecure, who are feeling a lot of anxiety pretty much every day. And so what we're seeing with this data is that mental health concerns and financial security are inextricably linked for many students. Now, the data is not causal. We can't say that anxiety causes basic needs insecurity or issues focusing on schoolwork, or that basic needs insecurity or issues focusing on schoolwork cause anxiety. We know there are a lot of different scenarios playing out for different students, but we can see that they are correlated, which can provide some important information about who may need different kinds of support. And then for my last slide here, we also asked students about the value of college. So even despite all of those challenges that we just talked about, many students still believe in the power of higher education, the ability for it to transform their lives. 70% of students with any likely mental health concern said the cost of college was a good investment for their financial future. and 82% agreed or strongly agreed that a college degree will provide them with a higher quality of life. So a little bit of a positive note to end on. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing and we'll move into some of our discussion here. Now that we've had some data in our heads for context on the issues, we're going to turn to the panel. And for those who are tuning in to watch, if you have a question that you'd like to ask someone on the panel, please go ahead and just put that in the Q&A or the chat. Actually, we didn't talk ahead of time. I don't know. You can do either one and we'll figure it out. We'll get to that in a bit. So for this first question, I'm going to ask it for everyone on the panel. If you could tell us how your role intersects with student mental health and how the student well-being landscape has evolved since you started. And let's go ahead and go in the same order just to keep it easy that we did in the beginning. We'll do Carson and then Edgar and then Dr. Willis.
Great, thank you. My kind of work on student mental health started in high school in 2019, following the passing of one of my close friends to suicide, and kind of moving into the space that we are now, and the role that I am with the Coalition for Student Wellbeing, looking not just at college, but mainly, at college student wellbeing. I would say the biggest thing that I've noticed over the course of the past 6 years, I think, is a recognition of how much of a foundation that student well-being is within higher education. One of the reasons why I was so excited about this panel is, between the four of us, we really do have really unique angles on higher education with, Dr. Willis kind of working in more of the administrative and attainment side that, student mental health doesn't start and stop at the counseling office. It impacts retention and degree completion and outcomes after graduation. And so, that's why I'm so passionate about student well-being, is I think it's really, the foundation of success in college and beyond.
Yeah, that's a good response. My intersection with student well-being really started when I became student body president. I wanted to go ahead and help fight food insecurity. And once you start doing research, I know it was mentioned earlier, when you notice food insecurity, housing security, all those are tied together. And that's where it's like it all starts leading from one thing to another. And that's when I realized, okay, you know what? Although sure, we can go ahead and help with food insecurity, it's also good to go ahead and start helping with those other areas of student well-being and focusing on that. I want to focus a little more particularly on what's mentioned about like how has the landscape changed. I'd say particularly, I think the one thing I feel is starting to become a little bit more common, at least in UTEP, is students speaking up. I think that's always the first step of like people being able to go ahead and ask for help when it is needed and going against what people might think.
Yeah, thanks so much. Both of you are right. I mean, advocacy, students speaking up, this is a different landscape than before. And I think students are far more engaged around this topic. And as far as the intersection with my work professionally, folks who are in the roles like I'm in really have the onus of carrying the message to the broader university leadership. When you oversee student affairs and enrollment management, you are a critical piece of making sure that the advocacy that students expect is carried to the senior leadership team, so that then allocations can be made, structural changes that may need to occur in organizations are possible. And that is really the core of the work that we do, because far too many students miss out on completion of college, not because they're not academically capable, but because their essential needs are not necessarily being met, and our systems and processes are not responsive in a proactive way.
Right. Thank you so much, all of you. That's such a good point about, people coming in with difficult situations or just life happens, and being able to help students with that can keep them in school. So Edgar, with your role as student body president at UTEP, or former, it gives you a really unique insight into both the student and institutional perspectives. So I was wondering, what do you see as the biggest barriers that students face when they're seeking mental health support on campus?
Yeah. If there was one thing I could focus on when it comes to talking about like the biggest barrier, I'd say accessibility is the biggest part. And I think diving a little bit more deeper, it's just, what do we consider accessible? I know, for example, at UTEP, the majority of our students are Hispanics and speak a second language. What does that mean? A lot of times when like you're stressed or you need someone to talk to, you have to speak in your home languages. For a lot of us, is Spanish. So what happens when some of the staff members from our counseling services aren't able to speak that same language that we are? what happens, we don't feel comfortable going ahead and describing to them what our situations are. I know UTEP does a very good job of having bilingual staff, so that helps. Being able to get more students in there. I think the other part too, going back to Hispanic, is that cultural stigma in the Hispanic culture, like speaking up for mental health is not really a thing. It's starting to pick up very slowly, but like when you speak up about it, you're deemed as like weak. So a lot of people feel that like stress, anxiety, even depression can still kind of feel a bit like taboo. So a big part of that is uh, having that barrier that prevents students from helping more, particularly in UTEP. But I think as a whole institution, going back, is just that accessibility of, is there somewhere where staff and other people can go ahead and meet students where they need to be met?
Yeah, thank you. That's right. That stigma, whether it's within your community or just as a general, I think everybody feels a little bit of stigma about being super honest about what's going on with them. So that's tough. And then to get past that and seek help and find that it's difficult to talk, maybe because of language barriers, that's even harder. So that's such a good point. Carson, I want to turn to you. Your advocacy work on student mental health, I think, puts you in a really good position to think about how processes and policies interact and impact students. So how can cross-campus collaboration between different departments and areas enhance student support systems?
It's a great question, and kind of, I think, building off, something that I see, to kind of the point of the last question as well, as a barrier, is in, sometimes large institutions, there's so many different resources that students aren't sure which door is the correct door. And, in the healthcare system and within, kind of health and wellness within higher ed, that same, kind of paradox exists. So I think there's a big barrier to be tackled in terms of effectively communicating to students what's available when and where. Because that's something that's really hard. It's, if you're in a time of crisis, it's hard to be able to take the time to go figure that out in the moment. And so one of the things that we've been really big at trying to look at working on in the next couple of months at the coalition is around transition of care, from high school to college, and kind of thinking through some of that stuff beforehand. On the point of kind of cross collaboration between, or within a university, I think it's so important because they're so linked. Academic success and student well-being, as we've mentioned, is directly correlated. And so how can we properly educate faculty to be partners in this initiative? I actually just had a great meeting the other week with some folks at UT Austin that are a part of the Texas Wellbeing Initiative. And so it's a couple of people in our student services office that their sole job is working on making sure that faculty and staff are well equipped to talk about mental health, to point students in the right directions. And so I think that collaboration between, the administration, the health and wellness department, and the different colleges and academics within that's a great example of how, you can proactively work to collaborate.
Yeah, that's so great. What a great initiative, because students will go to anyone on campus they're comfortable with, and there's no telling who that might be. So it's so important to have everybody be up to speed on how to handle that. Well, that kind of leads nicely into my question for Dr. Willis. You've been in higher education leadership for many years, to helping to create supportive environments for students. So given that experience and at multiple institutions, how do you think schools can better integrate financial wellness into their mental health and well-being strategies?
I think just building off of what Carson just shared, there can't be any wrong door. And so we have to cross-train our staff members. So whether you're an academic advisor or one of the many different roles that folks have in student affairs and student services, everybody needs to have a baseline level of knowledge about the resources that are available and where students should go. And we have to move from pointing them in a direction to taking them to the place where they really need the support. Because on campuses large and small, we sometimes fall into the trap of giving somebody directions of where they need to go and not really following through and making sure that they're connected with that support. And that's a major kind of retention issue. If we're providing students with holistic support, then we're able to, one, be educated enough across different organizational processes and procedures that we can all give a baseline level of information as a part of a warm handoff to the experts who have the information that they need, and specifically addressing the intersection of financial wellness into mental health and well-being, understanding that financial stress is likely the most most likely cause of distress in students on college campuses. And some of it is just basically not understanding the college funding process. So many students are stressed out and are succumb to anxiety over thoughts about not being able to afford college. And that is in addition to the students who have the real financial issues. So you have a mix between perceived and real, and it's causing true stress, depression, anxiety among students. And so understanding the connection, the root cause of the issues that land a student in the situation that they're in, but also normalizing the call for help. I mean, we need to make it more normal to say, hey, I'm not feeling well today, or I don't understand a process or procedure, and also creating embedded ways for students to self-identify for that help so that, you understand the mechanisms to get connected with the support that you need. And then lastly, I think holistic programming. We need to take a more proactive approach. And so even your student activities or student involvement and student engagement team members need to be producing programs that promote connection to resources and services, whether you think a student needs it or not, because we don't always know. I mean, it's not readily present on a person, whether they're dealing with the pressures of financial wellness. And so I think creating a more whole person approach to supporting students, educating them as an intervention, but also being actively involved in helping connect them with the right offices and resources.
Yeah, fantastic. I would love to dive into some of that a little bit more in a bit. So I'm going to ask some more questions and hopefully we can turn back to that. And I've got a couple more questions for the panel here before we're going to open it up for Q&A. So if anyone has questions they want to put into the chat or Q&A, please do that now. And I also just have more questions that will be a little bit of a surprise for you guys, so that we can do those while we're waiting on some Q&A questions to come in. So this next one is for both Edgar and Carson. How can institutions ensure that student voices are meaningfully included in wellness initiatives? And we'll start with Edgar first and then go to Carson.
Yeah, I'd say one way to go about it is definitely having students be part of the decision-making process. I know a lot of times when it comes to initiatives that staff is going to head and roll out, they get student perspective, but it's at the very end of the process. So like you as students don't actually have an influence in that process. You're just there to for them to say, okay, we had student involvement in the process. I'd say having students being part of those decisions, those well-being initiatives from the start is the best way to go about it. I'll go ahead and get that student involved. The other thing too is going back to what I mentioned earlier, where it's like meeting students where they are. A lot of times when coming from like an official university source, when they share a resource, it might not always get the most people using that resource. But when it's a lot different when it's like a student org that goes ahead and shows that resource to you, that you feel more open to do it. So for example, at UTEP, we have a lot of student organizations for student well-being. And funny enough, they share the same resources that staff goes ahead and share with the students, but for some reason, their conversion rate is just a lot better because I think that it's a lot more personable for students hearing from someone you're like your same age that has your same interest telling you, hey, like here's a resource that I use, in comparison to someone maybe 20, 30 years apart from you telling you, hey, here's a resource that we went ahead and digged up for you.
Yeah, I think Edgar hit most of it masterfully right there. The only thing that I would kind of add on is obviously prioritize your campus, right? Your students know what's best for them and what's best, for the institution, right? But I will also add on, there is a lot of value, I think, in looking at student-led initiatives from other campuses and across the country too. I think that's really where we've kind of found ourselves operating in terms of the Coalition for Student Wellbeing is not, just looking at one campus or one state, but how can we convene this conversation nationally around student wellbeing? And I'll give you a perfect example. A couple weeks ago, I was down in Austin, and we did an event with the Southeastern Conference, who got together about 100 or so student leaders, mainly, your student body presidents, that kind of thing, from all the SAC schools, and brought them to Austin. And not only did we have the opportunity to do a panel about faculty and administrator collaboration, but a lot of the breakouts were actually on like student success programs that they've had go well, and in particular, a couple of them were on mental health. One that kind of caught my mind in particular and made me go chat literally 2 hours later at lunch with our head of health and well-being, was around having a student navigator role in the counseling center. Some folks at the University of South Carolina saw that there was a big gap in how well utilized the counselors were, and they realized that a certain proportion of the counseling appointments were not being booked because they were reserved for people in crisis. And the kind of deemer for in crisis was clicking, on a virtual platform that like, I am in suicidal crisis, I need help, with no transparency of what the response would be after that screen. And so their student government leadership got together and tried to find a solution to this, and the way that they kind of went about doing it. And this is a program that launches this fall, so very interested to see how it goes. But they have students that will be working at the campus health centers that are trained in peer support. Their goal isn't to provide care, but it's rather to help other students, to Edgar's point of, kind of students helping students, help them get on the schedule and get in with the professionals. And, at that point, you're better utilizing the counselors, you're better getting students in the door, and it's just a win-win for everyone. So I think also looking across campuses at ideas like that have come out, and that's something that, I saw and thought, maybe we can look at replicating at UT, or Edgar could hear and want to go look at implementing at UTEP. So I think there's a lot of value in that form of collaboration as well.
Yeah, that's incredible. It's so great to get those stories, program wins at conferences, or just talking with folks in the industry, so you can carry those around and try to replicate that success. That's amazing. So, Dr. Willis, turning to you with the leadership questions again, what role does leadership play in prioritizing student well-being across campus departments?
Yeah, I think before I jump into that, I want to say that as a former college student body president 20 years ago, almost now, Carson and Edgar are spot on. And that really connects to what leadership ought to be doing. We have the responsibility of increasing accountability around student well-being. And I think that sometimes is the missing piece. It has to become a part of the success metrics of a campus. If it's reduced to quantitative stats on improvements that need to be made, that's compared to baselines year over year, then we can really move the needle. And I mean, there are phenomenal resources and assets out there around the work, like what you've presented today with Trellis. I mean, we need to be benchmarking our campuses against that and adding levels of accountability across departments and divisions. And I think the next step to that would be breaking down silos. And so creating better cross-campus collaboration between deans, the provost's office, so that's the academic leadership, but in concert with the folks in student affairs, as well as your student leaders, to really measure where a campus is and where the campus needs to be. Because when you're just shooting in the dark, you have no target, you have no baseline measurement of how many students are reporting that they are having issues across certain areas, then the resource allocation is fuzzy. Maybe it's happening, maybe it's not. Maybe it's just a part of funds that are left over. It shouldn't be that way. It has to be intentional. And this is sort of a new horizon in higher ed, because we, for some time, have dedicated a lot of resources to things that don't directly impact student success. But we know that these issues around well-being, specifically around financial well-being, are a major cause for concern, and one that the reputation of colleges and universities hinges on. And so I think that, if to summarize it, the two things are increasing accountability as well as breaking down silos in order to improve the students' ability to receive the help that they need and persist in their college degree programs.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. We did get a question, and I think, Dr. Willis, this for sure will be something that hopefully you can speak to. And then for Carson and Edgar, if you have information based on your role as students or working with institutions as well. So they ask, I'm curious about how the universities represented here meet the needs of their students. How do you utilize community-based organizations to meet the basic needs of your students? Do you have resources in-house? Do you give out lists? And or do you have formal partnerships with community-based organizations? So whoever wants to start.
Yeah, I appreciate that question. It's a very important one because oftentimes the community resources are not even considered when we're working to assist students. But I'll just share with you what we're doing most recently here at my institution. We're working really hard to take a case management approach to this work with students so that when we connect with them and we're referring them to resources, it's not a one-time interaction. We need to follow up. We need to check in and check on them. At the point that the campus's resources are not adequate or not meeting the needs of the students totally, we need to have established relationships with community organizations that sometimes have more expertise or more resources in order to assist students. The issues that students come to college with are unique and complex sometimes. And we have to understand that there are many more people who are qualified and well suited to assist us with caring for our students. And when we take a one team approach to caring for students, I think you get a much better outcome for the student, but you also improve the relationship between the campus and the community, which is also very, very important to create a stronger safety net that supports the entire campus community.
Yeah, fantastic. And Carson and Edgar, I don't know if you can speak to any knowledge you have of using community-based resources.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. I think it's one of those things where specifically at UT Austin, I mean, it's a school of 52,000 students, and I don't even know how many faculty, but a couple, thousand. And so the school is so big, it's almost its own community. And so I'd say a lot of our resources tend to be more in-house, from everything, the UT Outpost, which is the food pantry, is operated by the university. In terms of mental health services, there's a whole host of options. They operate the counseling and mental health center, in our student services building, which is able to see students in person. And in addition to that, has a partnership with a telehealth provider. And then the UT system also operates, a 24/7 crisis line, in addition to 988, the federal line. So there's a whole lot of resources there, and they definitely tend to be in-house. I think just because of the scale of the university.
Another thing I want to add is like being able to be accessible to students and being able to meet their needs. One thing, and if you guys ever get a chance, I suggest you all look it up. UTEP does a very good job of this. If you just look up on Google minor support, so like we're the UTEP minors. So minors is like our guest mascot. So if you look up minor support, there's this webpage that they have, and it lists the majority of the resources that UTEP has to offer, from like financial aid, scholarships, mental health and well-being, all these different resources. So it makes it easy as a student to have your like one-stop shop. You go in there and you know what you're looking for. So I think that's one very easy way that institutions could go ahead and meet the needs of their students.
And I'll just add, Carla, real quickly, as far as the mechanics or the mechanisms to improve the relationships of integrated support from community organizations, some of the ways that you can execute that or people can do that is you can look at the use of memorandums of understanding. You can look at integration of community groups into practice relationships with your clinicians. Program learning agreements are always a good thing. Even using student ambassadors as agents on campus to help promote the resources of off campus is a really, really good way to help with the integration. But also many times there are also faculty members who are experts around the work that practitioners are doing. And so creating the opportunity for roundtables or think tanks or just conversations about improving services, but also improving the overarching framework or approach that the campus takes. One of the specific areas that contributes to sometimes the financial strain on students is the cost of housing. And so, one innovative approach that's been taken across many campuses, but one specific one that I've worked at before was the development of a housing navigator position. And so this was a full-time role where a person's entire job was to work between the campus and the community to assist students with finding affordable housing. And even when they found themselves in situations where they couldn't afford their rent or something catastrophic or unfortunate happened, this person worked with them to make sure they understood the resources that were available and how to navigate the process. Because when you're in a distressed situation, it's really, really hard to have clarity around processes and procedures. And so having that trusted partner, that advisor, that kind of mentor who's well aware of the campus's policies and procedures, as well as the community resources and influencers who are interested in the work, becomes a vital lifeline that people and students really need.
Fantastic. Yeah. Thank you for all that, all of you. That's great information. And having that liaison seems like such an important role. It really just highlights to me how linked everything is, as we've been saying this whole time, just having that stress with finances, that stress leads to the mental stress as well. And that all just sort of snowballs into each other. We do have another question. If institutions were to consider implementing mandatory campus-wide training for faculty and staff to increase awareness on these issues that students face, what do you see as the potential benefits and possible drawbacks on that as an approach from an institutional and individual perspective? So again, Dr. Willis, right up your alley, but certainly happy to have everybody weigh in.
Yeah, I think the drawback that somebody would point out is the time and the amount of pressure of trainings that are already mandatory for folks. But it is a worthwhile effort, and it's occurred sometimes in a less formal way with campuses. But I think it is a very innovative and forward-thinking approach to making sure that students receive the support that they need. We actually here at Stephen F. Austin recently kind of revised our onboarding for employees, and we added a section from the student affairs area that speaks directly to how you support students. No matter what your role is on the campus, if you encounter a student in distress, here are the offices and resources that you need to be aware of. Now we can stand to formalize it a little bit more than just a snippet as a part of the training, but I think that's a phenomenal idea to actually make it a part of how you onboard people into the organization, but with a true, well thought out set of modules or workshops that really prepare people to take ownership of caring for the campus community and connecting them to resources that really help them, as opposed to just pointing them in a direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Carson and Edgar, I don't know if you have anything you want to add there.
Yeah, I do. I want to just answer the last part of the question, which from an individual perspective, what are some drawbacks and some benefits? I'd say the drawback is always just the time. The timing training maybe with a lot of time, it might just feel like it's just like a check the box exercise. But I'd say from an individual perspective, the benefit is that it gives faculty and staff just more confidence in having those tough conversations. I feel that a lot of times they might want to help, but with all the rules set in place, regulations from institutions, from the state, you might worry about saying the wrong thing or possibly overstepping. So I think having those proper training demystifies that process and normalizes kind of having that support system.
Yeah, absolutely. And Edgar, when you're talking before about the sort of one-stop shop, website with resources and whatnot, I think that's such a good thing also for faculty and staff, because they're not going to remember potentially all the potential things available for students, but having one place that they know they can look at or they can give to students, that seems like such an important thing as well. So any more questions, please write them in. In the meantime, Dr. Willis, this might be repeating a little bit on your part if you've already said some of these things, but I'm just curious what some effective strategies or programs or policies you've done at Stephen F. Austin or other institutions that you've been at to support student mental health. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry about that. One of the most impactful really occurred at my prior institution, where we separated our case management or our clinical social work piece from our student health center, and we created a standalone center for essential needs. And that center was basically specialists in supporting students' basic needs from a number of financially stressing issues, where there was housing insecurity, food insecurity. The food pantry was included in that kind of newly configured office, but it also signaled a change in the way we do our work, where we were dedicating resources and professional expertise to the issue that was directly impacting student success in the way of enrollment and retention. Because students are also different now, and they come to campus and they want to know what resources are available to me. What happens in an instance where I'm not able to meet a specific need. And so I think making the decision to reorganize around new goals and priorities, because we often as leaders are working to fit things together that don't really work. You know, we know that our students have changed. We know that the landscape of higher ed has changed. We know that tuition costs and other fees are driving the affordability issue, but we're operating sometimes with the same structures for, decade over decade. And so really repurposing or repositioning the organizational alignment as well as the resources in order to directly meet student needs, I think has been probably the most impactful. When it comes to policies, though, and this is not as much of a policy as much as it is an approach, we really need to take an unconditional positive regard approach to working with students. The idea that, it's college or life is just inherently difficult and people are better when they have to go through difficult times and challenges. Well, okay, but some people don't survive it. And we shouldn't be going for survival on our campus. We should be trying to help our students thrive on campus. And so in order to move in that direction, we have to emphasize with our team members that we are here to support students, to encourage them, to motivate, to inspire, and the glimmer of hope that they may need rests in our offices. And so when we're sitting around the table looking at data, remembering that those data points have a face and a name. And those faces and names have a future that will likely impact the direction of communities, places, and organizations if they're supported and they're cared for and their dreams, hopes, and goals are able to come to fruition.
Yeah, I love that building that culture of caring across the whole campus. That's amazing. Carson, I think given your experience in the work that you've done, this might be a good one for you. How do you think institutions can reduce stigma around mental health and promote help-seeking behavior among students?
Yeah, I feel like it's something that we definitely across the board, I think have made a lot of progress with. I think especially that was one of the things that we always, I feel like, said with COVID was, it was kind of like taking the Band-Aid off. Like the problem was there before, but, just kind of more people knew about it after the conversation around COVID. To answer it directly, that I almost want to go back to what Edgar was saying about, how the example that he cited where they had higher conversion rates on, resource utilization when that messaging came from students. So I think it's really just kind of looking internally to find the partners, and they don't have to all be students. I'm sure there's plenty of, trusted faculty voices on campus, but really looking to, find the right messenger. But I think, the conversation around mental health is definitely in, trending and generically the right place. I think the problem that we're more seeing now is talking about getting help and getting help are two staunchly different things. There's still a big leap in between both of those. So I think it's, looking to the point that I made earlier about accessibility and communication around what resources are available is all the more important to, kind of convert on conversation and turning that into action and help seeking behavior.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. And then sort of building on that with Edgar, in your work as a student leader, what do you think that students, or what have you heard that students say that they need most to feel supported in their mental health?
That's a good question, actually. Students need most to feel supported with their mental health.
Sorry to throw that at you.
No, it's all good. I think I know it's going to sound like a very weird response, but just kind of from what I've seen, it goes back. So I know we mentioned all the three things are connected, like mental health, food insecurity, housing security, where it's like if you kind of very slowly try to solve one of the issues, the others get solved as a result. I know because, for example, one thing we worked throughout my term as like in SGA was helping to get our food pantry up and running. So we have a mobile food pantry that actually still runs every Monday where students come and get free food. And it's very interesting because we started to realize where at first, when you would talk to some of the students who were going for their first time, like they were pretty much like, "Ugh," they didn't want to like open up about like anything that they were facing. But after a few weeks where they were coming, picking up food every week, they would be more open to talking about, hey, like here's an issue that I have, and what does that allow us to do? It's a lot easier for us to go ahead and place to send them the right way and give them the proper resource. So I'd say like I hope that properly answers the question. But I would say like if you start to slowly focus in on just one particular part of the equation, you could solve the rest. Because we would have never known about like the student's mental health well-being if it wasn't for him having to come and pick up food because of the food insecurity, right? So it's like you focus on one issue and you end up solving another one.
Yeah, that's so great. And sort of opening up the letting the student know that we are here to help you. And maybe that helps too, just to open that up for them. Carson, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think to just kind of bounce off of that, another thing that, Edgar's response highlights is community. That's something that, even at a school as big as UT, it almost becomes all the more important, right? Because it's such a big school, it's easy for people to kind of get lost in the madness, so to speak. And one of the programs that I think UT's done a really good job at, in terms of, promoting student well-being, but this is mainly an academic affairs driven initiative, is the first year interest group program, which is pretty much a requirement that any incoming student has to be a part of some first year program that's designated by the university. This isn't just a club. It's a mandatory 3-hour class or 2-hour class. Your first semester, some of them even span into your second or third semesters. But really, as each program may differ, there's probably 20 or so different ones on campus, in the different colleges. But really, the main goal is promoting awareness about the resources that universities offer, helping that transition from high school to college. And third, kind of helping you get to that community. So I kind of like to look at that program as, for most people, 95% of people, that's not the community you stay with, all 2 to 4 years, but it's the community that gets you, to the other communities. It's the, kind of little bit of, to be honest with you, handholding that, the school does with you right when you get on campus, of helping you, point you in the right directions to kind of find where you will not just, survive, to Dr. Willis's point, but really thrive, socially, emotionally, academically, the whole nine.
Yeah, great. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, just to build on Carson's point, one thing that occurs here in our counseling center at Stephen F. Austin that I think is a gold standard in this work is taking a more proactive approach to reduce the stigma around seeking counseling and mental health support. And specifically what our counselors do and the leadership team there is we offer a number of different approaches to counseling. So there are small groups, there are equine therapy, there's canine therapy. So for a medium-sized campus, we are fairly innovative and modern when it comes to the ways we reach students, and it's very proactive. And so I think making sure that you are meeting students where they are. That's come up before in today's conversation, but what that looks like in action means multi-dimensional approaches to reaching the needs of students, and then also the modality. Can students actually get to you? If it's not a physical visit, are you offering ways for them to meet with counselors virtually? Are you maybe considering expanded hours of when you can work with them? And more than that, are your counselors and case managers and outreach specialists visible on campus? Are they a part of the community that's embedded and aware of things that are going on, and also connected with professional staff across divisional areas so that they're an easy resource and a partner that has the trust of the relationship that allows for smooth, warm handoffs to happen to support students?
Love it. Thank you so much for everybody jumping in on that. That was such good information, I think, for everybody to hear. And as we're wrapping up here, I just wanted to have one final question. I like to do a magic wand question sometimes when I'm in a group conversations. So just broadly, what would you like to see on campus to help support student mental health? And that could be, policies, programs, whatever makes sense. What's something that comes to mind that you would like to see on campuses to help student mental health and support those students? Go ahead, Carson.
Love this question. And I literally, when I kind of pitch this, say it is my magic wand solution. So that was really easy for me to come up with an answer with. But it actually starts, well before college. My kind of magic wand solution, in my opinion, is having mental health education be prevalent in K through 12. If that's through PE classes, great, wherever school districts seem fit. It's something I've legislatively worked on in Massachusetts. We've, made some progress there. The progress of schools adopting the policy has outpaced the progress of the law being passed, which, at least helps me sleep at night. But I think one of the really important things is making sure that it's age appropriate and it's delivered in a means that is most, applicable for their community. And that's why the bill that we actually have been working on, it's literally a 3 paragraph bill. Like it does not prescribe any specific curriculum or instruction method, but it's really just kind of giving districts a little push. And we're fortunate in Massachusetts to actually have a technical curriculum assistance center based out of the University of Massachusetts to help these districts tailor their needs in curriculum. So we kind of view it as utilizing educators as a partner in this work. And so that would definitely, be my magic wand solution. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Edgar or Dr. Willis, who wants to go next?
Yeah, I guess I'll go. A magic wand solution. Ooh, I'd say the biggest thing is having some sort of peer slash like mentor system. I found it like at UTEP we have a mentorship org, and I found that I'm pretty open with the people who I work with and all that in comparison to like working with a professional staff member. So having that implemented across the whole campus makes it very easy for you to go ahead and speak up. So as a mentee, you don't really know much, so you're like saying, "Hey, here's something that I'm struggling with," all of that. And as a mentor, you say, "Hey, I know this resource here. Let me go ahead and share it with you." So I think that would be my magic wand solution because it makes it very personable. So that we talked about earlier, having that higher utilization rate, and you're able to speak up more comfortably.
Yeah, I think my magic wand would be to create much more funding for these programs and services. But if the funding could happen, I think scaling the resources and supports that are already there. We have so many phenomenal experts across college campuses nationwide who are working really hard to do this work. But I mean, in large part, many are under resourced and they're fighting for funding between other campus priorities. And so I think more resources allocated towards mental health and well-being of students because we know the return on investment. And there's both a monetary return, but there's also a social return. I mean, students come to campuses, they are able to take care of themselves first and foremost. And so they go to the classroom better prepared to really get everything out of a college experience that they should be getting out of it, as opposed to just barely making it through. Kudos to all of the people who struggle to get through college and they make it. And my heart goes out to the people that don't. It is the issue of students not completing college because of non-academic issues that I think represents by and large part the retention crisis that we have across college campuses. We're not graduating enough students, and some of the ones that were graduating, they barely made it. And so you leave beat down and burnt out, and your view of what's next is clouded by the struggle that you had to go through to finally get to where you needed to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Funding would be incredible. Well, we're right at the top of the hour here, so I just wanted to say thank you to Carson Domey, Edgar Loya, and Dr. Kent Willis. Thank you so much for joining us on the panel today to talk about this very important topic. And I'm going to turn it to Andrea in case we have some final words here regarding the webinar itself.
No, that was wonderful. I don't have anything to add. I know we're right at the cusp here, but I put in the chat a link to our student financial wellness survey if anyone would like their institution to participate or explore what it would look like to participate. Thank you very much to our panelists. I really appreciate all your insight and perspective, and I wish Carson and Edgar an awesome, successful academic year.
Thank you guys so much. I'm so glad we're able to partner with you all on this, and so grateful to Dr. Willis and Edgar for taking the time. And, please, if anyone watching is interested in our work, it takes champions on both sides, students and, administrators like Dr. Willis. So if you have any interest in our work, feel free to shoot me an email. My email is just carson@c4sw.org, or find me online. We'd love to find a way to work with you guys, and I'm excited to collaborate with Trellis furthermore in the future as well.
Thank you, Carson.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trellis. Really appreciate it. And y'all are both phenomenal student leaders. And thank you for picking up the mantle to advocate for such an important topic.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.